Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video I'll be sharing to you all the books that I ended up reading in the month of February and also the books I plan on reading in March. So February was a kind of fun month. We ended up going on our honeymoon, and despite kind of being on our honeymoon and being fairly busy, we did a good amount of traveling in kind of between places. So I did manage to get a good amount of reading done, much better than January, where I only read one book. So far this month I read a total of 4 books as well. And for the most part, I really enjoyed all of them. And so without further ado, let's get started. So first up, I ended up reading The Songbird and the Heart of Stone by Carissa Broadbent. And this one I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So this is kind of the second duology basically in this kind of connecting series. So the first one is The Serpent and the Wings of Night, and so this is kind of a continuation of this, but it follows a different protagonist. Basically, I don't want to spoil the premise of this one, but basically this series takes place in this world where kind of vampires and humans kind of are, coexisting. I wouldn't say coexisting, but they are kind of living together in the same world. In the first book, we follow this person who is a human who grows up in this vampire kingdom, and so she ends up competing in this kind of tournament where if she wins, she gets granted a wish by one of the kind of gods in this world, and it kind of goes off from there. This is kind of dealing with the aftermath of the first duology, but follows Misha from the first book and kind of her experience as well. So I don't want to spoil too much about this one, but I'm just kind of reading the notes here. But I really loved my kind of the adventure and kind of how the characters in this one in particular have a task, and there's essentially kind of different trials they have to go to in order to kind of achieve this task. I felt it was kind of very similar in formulation to The Serpents and the Wings of Night, where there are kind of, again, kind of trials, and they each kind of have to overcome this like task or trial for each one. So it was a little bit formulaic, but I still really enjoyed it. I felt this book in particular tackled a lot of different things in terms of themes of, what love is, abuse of power, abusive relationships, and, I guess kind of how people who are in these abusive relationships don't really know what to expect out of love, or their expectations of what love is are kind of skewed. So I really like how it tackled that dynamic in this one, which kind of took me by surprise, so I really liked it. I did feel like there were like some minor pacing issues where some parts were a little bit slower than others, but overall I really loved the 2 main protagonists in here, and the ending was kind of really spectacular for me. That's what kind of bumped it up from like, a fine, 3-star read, like I was enjoying it, but to that 3.5, that ending, oh my gosh, was so explosive. I cannot wait to see what happens next. This series overall is not like spectacular and mind-blowing, but I do have a really good time reading them, so that is always good. But like I said, I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and I think the sequel comes out sometime this year, which is exciting as well, so I don't have to wait too long to see what happens. But yeah, overall it was like a fun ride, and only had a few things that I was a little bit nitpicky about, but overall really enjoyed this one. So next I ended my hold of this on the library came in, and it was perfect timing too because it was fairly short, so I was able to finish it on the flight from Dublin to Barcelona, so it was a pretty quick read for me, and it is Thornhedge by Kingfisher. This is kind of a novella that follows Toadling, who is this human that is kind of taken by the folk creatures into the folk world, and we kind of follow her several years after that, where she's been tasked to kind of protect this secluded castle that has kind of been forgotten to history, and we kind of figure out the events that led to her kind of protecting this thing that is kind of in this castle, what she's trying to keep there, and she ends up crossing paths with this knight that is also interested as well. I really loved the atmosphere of this book. I think that was my favorite part. I love kind of that fairy tale kind of with thorns kind of feeling that you got, where it's like that dark fairy tale feeling. I really love her atmosphere and the world she creates. It was very similar to the feeling sorry, excuse me. I came back, I've had this cold for 3 weeks now, so even though I was traveling with a mask, I still came back with a cold. But nevertheless, I think if you like the feeling from Nettle and Bone, that like fairy tale like dark fairy tale vibes, then I think this book was very similar to that. I did have like some issues. There was just something about this that made me feel like I was wanting more. I wanted a little bit more out of it. I felt like everything kind of resolved so quickly for something being so, you know, terrible. Like it was kind of the solution to it was kind of solved rather quickly, and so I wanted it to maybe be a little bit more like longer, so maybe 50 pages longer. I felt like we could have got that really kind of fleshed out, and there's just, my husband read this too as well, and he just like, there's just something missing about it. But despite that, I really kind of loved the themes of like found family, the kind of fairy tale spooky vibes. I really loved that as well. So this one I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. Not my favorite Kingfisher. I think I've only read A Sorceress Comes to Call and Nettle and Bone, and this one was, you know, okay. I felt like I just wanted it to be a little bit longer, but like I said, overall, you know, it was a fun, quick read. Next, I ended up reading When He Was Wicked by Julia Quinn, and this is Francesca's book in the Bridgerton series. So I kind of knew what was going to happen basically within the opening chapter of this book, just with the TV show, with things that happened and just kind of reading things online. So I kind of knew what the opening plot of this one was going to be, but I think this was my favorite so far. So we follow Francesca, and I'm not going to spoil this because, again, I don't want to spoil this for anyone, but I think this one was my favorite of the Bridgerton books so far. I felt like they're not like perfect. This is kind of just a romance book that I'm just reading for fun, but there was just something I really liked about this. I felt like Francesca as a character was much more dimensional, and she wasn't in as much of a kind of red flag relationship as some of the other ones. Particularly, I was so disappointed by Eloise's books because she's my favorite in the TV show, but this one I wasn't really disappointed by, and I'm like, oh, I hope they can kind of keep the kind of same tension that they had between the characters. This is one where it's like, I don't want them to change the source material too much, and I'm really excited too for the TV show because they made the love interest a female, so that is awesome. So I'm excited to see how that will play out in kind of future seasons. But I'm just reading my notes here. I enjoyed the romance and learning more about Francesca. I felt like she was very much kind of, you don't really know too much about her in the previous books, so kind of getting to learn more about her character. I like how she kind of suffered a lot of, you know, real world challenges that a lot of women can relate to, like infertility, miscarriages, all those things. I felt like it made it much more realistic in the conflicts that she was kind of experiencing, having to move on from a lost love. I thought was really well done. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, this one was my favorite, so I gave this a 4 or 5 stars. It was a fun read, and I flew through it relatively quickly as well, which was always good. And kind of to round out the month, I had a new release that I was so excited to dive into, and it is Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales by Heather Fawlette. This is the final book in the Emily Wilde series. I did not realize this was the final book in this like trilogy until after I finished reading it, so I felt a little sad that I did not know this at the time. But basically, because this is the final book in the series, I won't spoil what's going on particularly in this one, but we follow Emily Wilde, who is kind of a researcher at a university in the early 1900s, and she studies the folk. And in the first book, she's kind of creating a kind of encyclopedia of the kind of folk creatures in this remote kind of winter wonderland town that's kind of very similar, I would say, to like kind of Norway or something like that. And she ends up crossing paths with this colleague named Wendell, and they kind of butt heads. This one I would say skews a little bit more on kind of the cozy fantasy vibes, but I think it also draws elements to a lot of kind of the kind of elements of folk that I really enjoy. In particular, I think if you like the Folk of the Air trilogy by Holly Black, if you like Spiderwick, how the folk are depicted in that series in particular, where they kind of have some teeth in them, they're ugly, they're dark and dangerous, as opposed to like Sarah J Maas, this one kind of has that more kind of Holly Black vibe, which I do really enjoy. I do like my, you know, Sarah J Maas fae, but sometimes I grew up reading Spiderwick, so kind of going back to something that really drew me into this kind of type of fantasy. And I really like this one. I felt like this one was a really good conclusion to the series, but it did leave it open-ended for maybe, you know, more books in the future. So fingers crossed, because I do really enjoy that. I love seeing the character growth and development between Emily and Wendell in this one in particular. There's a lot of sacrifices that are made, and just how like real and honest their kind of love story is. It felt really realistic to me, you know, the sacrifices we make and how we, or people that are in a relationship, help make each other better. I really loved that one. I did feel like there were some pacing issues where I feel like some parts, like especially in this one, it just felt too easy to kind of, you know, solve and kind of conclude everything, while some parts that weren't really relevant seemed to drag on. So I wish kind of the pacing was a little bit better. So that was my only complaint, but overall I felt this was a really fun conclusion to the series. I'm very sad it's over, but this one I gave a 4 out of 5 stars as well. So I'm kind of sad that it's over, but definitely one that I want to kind of go back and reread many years from now. So definitely the series is near and dear to my heart. All right, so next let's move on to the books I plan on reading in March. So I'm already 10 pages into this one, so it doesn't really count. There are some carryover from February because I didn't want to bring any physical books with me, so I just brought my e-reader, and whatever books I could get from the library is what I read kind of mostly in February. So first up I have The Courting of Bristol Keats by Mary E. Pearson. This is one that I said I'm only kind of 10 pages or so into it, but we follow Bristol, who his father has been kind of tragically murdered or kind of in a hit and run, and it kind of integrates a lot of fae elements in here as well. I remember I've read the synopsis of this and I've probably told you guys about it quite a few times, so I won't kind of delve into it again, but this is what I'm currently reading right now, and then for the first 10 pages I'm enjoying it so far. And kind of another carryover that I won't go into is The Assassin's Apprentice by Rob and Hobb. I definitely want to get into this one as well. Eventually, I feel like there's just been so many new releases that I've been excited to read that this one's kind of keeps getting pushed back. So eventually I will get to it this year, so we'll see if I do get to it in March or not. Next, I obviously have to include Sunrise on the Reaping by Susanna Collins. I'm so excited for this Haymitch prequel to the Hunger Games. I always felt like he was such a very interesting character in the book, so I'm very interested to see kind of what led him to when we were kind of first introduced to him with his kind of drinking problems, all his things. So I'm really excited. I felt like she did a really good job with the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, so I'm very curious to see, you know, what kind of Easter eggs or kind of foreshadowing to things that we see, you know, in the original trilogy play out. So I'm definitely really excited for this one when it comes out in a couple weeks. And next, kind of to mix things up, because I feel like I've been reading a lot of fantasy recently. And so first up I have The Spy Coast by Tess Gerritsen. This is her newest kind of thriller series that came out last year, and I think the second installment comes out sometime this year as well, but it just sounds super interesting. So it says, former spy Maggie Bird came to the seaside village of Purity, Maine, eager to put the past behind her after her mission went tragically wrong. These days she's living quietly on her chicken farm, still wary of blowback from the events that forced her early retirement. But when a body turns up in Maggie's driveway, she knows it's a message from former foes who haven't forgotten her. Maggie turns to her local circle of old friends, all retirees from the CIA, to help uncover the truth about who is trying to kill her and why. The Martini Club of former spies may be retired, but they still have a few useful skills that they're eager to use again, if only to spice up their rather sedate new lives. So I'm very excited about this one. I do really love kind of spy thrillers, and I think kind of this one being kind of a retired spy where their past is coming to haunt them seems like it'll be rather fun. I really love Tess Gerritsen. She was the author that really got me into kind of crime, kind of thriller, murder mystery books. So I'm really excited to dive into this one, and I feel like it's just very wintry, and it is March 6th right now when I'm filming this, and there is snow on the ground. So I feel like my days of kind of snowy reads are kind of, you know, coming to an end, hopefully. I live in Ohio, so who knows. But yeah, I definitely want to get to this one this month, and it seems like one I probably will fly through. And lastly, this one is just a little bit shorter that I've heard really great things about, and I definitely want to read more from this author, and it is The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Morena-Garcia. I've read Mexican Gothic, which I really enjoyed, and this one's a little bit different. I've heard it kind of has Bridgerton vibes with magical realism, so I'm really excited for this one. It says, they are the beautiful ones, Loisale's most notable societies in this spring is Nina's chance to join their ranks, courtesy of her well-connected cousin and his calculating wife. But the grand season has just begun, and already Nina's debut has gone disastrously AWOR. She has always struggled to control her telekinesis. Neighbors call her the Witch of Old House, and the haphazard manifestations of her powers make her the subject of malicious gossip. When entertainer Hector arrives to town, Nina is dazzled. A telekinetic like her, he has traveled the world performing his talents for admiring audiences. He sees Nina not as a witch, but ripe with potential to master her power over him. With Hector's help, Nina's talents blossom, as does her love for him. But great moments are for fairy tales, and Hector is hiding a truth from Nina and himself that threatens to end their courtship before it even begins. This one just seems like a lot of fun. Like I said, I've heard really great things about this one, and I really loved her writing in Mexican Gothic, so I'm really excited to see how I feel about this one. And I feel like just with the flowers on here, this might be a good book to transition to once we kind of get hopefully into the spring weather soon. So that is it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what books you read in February and all of that fun stuff. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.